welcome back to another Just 5 Mins. So today we're back in the Microsoft pond to have a look at something that I think if you work with SQL databases in general, and for that I mean like Microsoft SQL obviously, but MySQL, Postgres, things like that. Um, well, maybe the latter two, you might have to wait a little bit. They're getting there. Anyway, what am I rambling about? I'm talking about Azure Data Studio. So don't be mistaken by the name because it isn't just for Azure. Okay. And it's when it says Data Studio, yeah, you can do a lot of interesting things for sure that you can't say, for instance, do in SQL Server Management Studio or SSMS. Um, SSMS has been around for years, donkey's years, in fact, in various guises, forms, and everything else. And it's really difficult to move away from it because everybody's got used to it. However, Azure Data Studio, and again, the name a little bit misleading because it can connect to local SQL servers, and I believe, if I've got my facts correct, Postgres and MySQL in the very near future. I'm just having a quick look because there's quite a lot of extensions. Certainly, you can hook up to things like Azure Cosmos DB or MongoDB, and there are a lot of other developments going on again, mainly around things like MySQL and Postgres SQL. So, but again, in my world and in a lot of people's world, I guess it's Microsoft SQL Server, whether that is local or when I say local, it could be in a VM, it could be local literally on your desktop, but it also can be the Azure SQL databases as well. Okay, so the environment is it takes a little bit of getting used to. If you've used VS Code, it's basically built on the same platform as VS Code. And some would say, well, why do I need yet another application? I can just use VS Code. And sure enough, VS Code has got extensions to manage databases and everything else. Yeah, but it's more of a focal point really with Azure Data Studio. Okay. And as the same as VS Code, you can actually have GitHub Copilot integrated now with Azure Data Studio. And again, all of this isn't really new. I mean, you can use all of this GitHub Copilot in VS Code anyway, and you have been for a little while now. Okay, but again, it's all about a focal point using Azure Data Studio to work with, databases and related data sort of structures. So where it comes in is that it's the Copilot from GitHub is being really sort of narrowed down, if you like, for database type work. So you can do things like if you've got a select query, you can basically ask Copilot to go and say, well, look, I want to pivot on these columns. And who doesn't like that? Trying to work out pivot and unpivot. It's also great sort of looking at things like CTEs, common table expressions. So where you might need to read a set of data and then as that data is read, operate on another set of other data, like you might be updating something based on some conditions, all sorts of things like that. Okay, so there's some pretty good advanced stuff going on there. Not to mention, in my world of late, being able to do some advanced sort of SQL XML and SQL JSON, actually, which has been really quite useful. The JSON one especially, dumping JSON into a SQL table or a column and then using SQL JSON to extract various bits of elements, including repeating rows like line items and things like that. But anyway, it's come a long way. One thing I would say, though, if you're going to use Azure Data Studio, it is free. But there are, and I would have a read, and I'll put some links in the show notes because there are a couple of key extensions that if you use SQL Management Studio, then there's a couple of extensions that you will automatically need, in my opinion. Things to handle table creation, uh, all that sort of stuff, store procedure creation. There's a couple of official Microsoft extensions for Azure Data Studio. I'll put the links below anyway. Um, but yeah, it's got Copilot, of course. What hasn't? But it does really help. And like I say, it's really sort of like focused on the database and data related sort of actions. So it's probably worth checking out if you live in that world for sure. By the way, Azure Data Studio, because it's built on the same platform as VS Code, you can use it on different platforms. But again, if you're going to connect to things like Microsoft SQL Server, you can get that on Linux, actually. What am I talking about? So actually, yeah, you could run it on other platforms as well. So I'll put some links in below, but it's just I find it a little bit easier to use because you've got IntelliSense and everything like that. And generally, we're using SQL Management Studio more of a habit, and I think Data Studio is definitely the way to go for managing, more advanced sort of stuff rather than just your normal select queries. So anyway, that's what I've got this time around. Until next time, take care, and we'll catch you next time.